What up, world history? This is Mr. View again, back. And today we're going to still talk about Napoleon. Remember that dude that ruled France? He wasn't actually born in France. He was born in that island of Corsica, but it was controlled by France. And he joined the army, moved up the ranks quickly because he hid his losses. And he really celebrated his successes. He was a braggadocio, if you'd like to say that. He was a great general, though. On the battlefield, he would always change up his game plan. And so he never used the same battle plan twice, which made him very difficult to defeat in battle. It said that he was worth a lot of men in the field of battle when they're actually fighting war. So he was awesome as a general, but he did have some losses. He takes the crown from the Pope, basically saying, I'm the man. I'm not given power by anybody. I take power. We named a complex after him, the Napoleonic Complex or Napoleon Complex. It's for short, guys. He does a lot of things that people in France really, really liked. He held those yes or no plebiscites, which the common people thought that they had a say in government. They always voted like him, though. He controlled prices. He encouraged new industry. He built roads and canals. He set up a system of public schools, and he allowed religious freedom. So he really went for the common people. And remember, just like the Third Estate being 98% of France, that's where you get your power. If you can control the common people, you can control a country, because most countries, let's say all countries, are made up of common people. People very similar to us. There's very few that are on that really, really rich side. And so if the common people really want to gang up, they can make some tremendous changes within countries because they have all the people. The Napoleonic Code followed Enlightenment ideas, equality of citizens before the law, religious toleration, etc. We talked about that and how it was a little bit misogynistic, anti-women, if you will. So Napoleon controls Europe. Almost all of it except Britain. If you see on this map here, the dark blue, the light blue, and the pink, that's all controlled by Napoleon. And that is the civilized world for the most part at this time. So he has a good chunk of the world. And, England's hanging out way up here, Great Britain, whatever you want to call them. He said that land rats don't fight sea rats. And he basically says, we don't want to cross the pond to go fight England. It's not our style. So let's just stick to the land battles. Now, to the new stuff from today. There were some problems when Napoleon conquered these countries. I told you yesterday that some of these countries didn't mind Napoleon coming in because he was giving common people more power. He was giving them more rights. But that being said, these countries had strong nationalism, pride in their own country. So they didn't necessarily want Napoleon ruling over them or France ruling over them. They didn't want to speak French. They wanted to speak German or some other language. They wanted their heritage, right? And so they didn't necessarily like Napoleon being there and France ruling them. They wanted their own traditions. They wanted their own things. They did want the common people to rise up, but they didn't want France to necessarily do that for them. They didn't want a foreign country ruling them. So what they did is they engaged in guerrilla warfare. Guerrilla warfare is hit and run raids. So you don't stand toe-to-toe with the enemy. You stand behind a tree, you shoot one guy, and then you run away. And then the next day, you shoot one guy, and then you run away. And then you shoot one guy, and then you run away. So in that way, a few people, say 5 dudes doing that every day, they can kill a lot of people. And it's very disheartening to Napoleon's army and the French people. So this is what happened to the United States in Vietnam. The Vietnamese, they didn't want to line up against the United States. They wanted to hit us and run, hit us and run, hit us and run. And that was very, very smart, because when you don't have the numbers, you've got to figure out a way to equal it out. So these countries practiced guerrilla warfare against the French because they didn't really want to be ruled by another country. The dumbest thing that Napoleon did was invade Russia. Terrible decision, right? Dumb, dumb, dumb. He's dumb, and Hitler, who tries it way later, is dumber. So it shouldn't have been Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels in Dumb and Dumber. It should have been Napoleon and Hitler. It was dumb. He has this grand army, 400,000 dudes, and he decides, let's go attack Russia. Bad decision, right? Even though his army was the best army in the world at this point, Russia had a very good idea. They decided, let's use this scorched earth tactic. And so what they did was they allowed the French to keep going further and further in their country. But they burned everything as they left. So Russia retreated, but they burned the crops, they burned the houses. And now, as Napoleon and his army gets deeper and deeper into Russia, there's no food and there's no shelter. And that's a problem, right? So the farther they get away from France and into Russia, they think, hey, we're winning. This is really easy. They just keep running away. Yeah, but that was Russia's idea. There was no food and no shelter, and all of a sudden, bam, winter hits. And winter is very, very cold in Russia, believe it or not. So when the French had no food and no shelter, they have to run home, right? Because they're freezing to death. And when they run home, a lot of their guys just go and desert. They decide, hey, we're not waiting for the friggin' army. We are getting out of Dodge as quick as we can. And so they start making their way back to France. Russia, at this point, they know they've got them. So they follow the French army and keep picking them off. So to add salt to the wounds, the French people are trying to run away, trying to get back to France, and they're getting shot in the back as they do so. And then the Russians would run away with that guerrilla warfare tactic, right? So the French limped home with 10,000 dudes. I'm no mathematician, but 400,000 to start, coming back with 10,000, that's about 390,000 deaths or losses. So France really got whooped when they attacked Russia. That was their biggest mistake. Otherwise, had he waited, it might have been a little bit different story. But you can't attack Russia and expect to win, especially in the winter months. So those temperatures were as low as 40 degrees below zero. The French soldiers, they were building shelters from corpses. They'd, make little huts out of dead bodies, if you will, and try to get away from the wind and the cold at night. Because it wasn't a one-day walk, right? It was a long walk. And a battlefield was covered with debris and 30,000 corpses half-eaten by wolves. So there's a long line of dudes walking, and eventually you'd see your comrades that are laying dead, they're frozen to death or whatever, and they're half-eaten by wolves. That's very disheartening, if you will. So the French people, the French soldiers, it was a big loss for them. This leads to the downfall of Napoleon. Because he had beaten up all these countries decided, hey, he's weak now. The Grand Army is wiped out. Let's go attack the dude while we can. And so they all gang up on Napoleon. And Napoleon loses. And he has to abdicate. He has to step down, right? He has to give up that crown that he had. And the country say, yeah, that's great and all, Napoleon. You can give us that crown, but you're also going to be stuck on an island. We're going to send you to Elba, this island. And so he gets put on this island. He's exiled, and he has to stay there. And he has armed guards throughout, and, he can't just leave the island. He's stuck. It's not like it's super prisonish or anything like that, but he can't leave. This slinks France into a great big depression, right? And they want Napoleon back in these better days. So they get him back. Napoleon escapes from Elba and he comes back to France, and it's all whoop, whoop, whoop. It's awesome for France, right? But that only lasts 100 days. The alliance gets back together and they defeat Napoleon again. This is at Waterloo. So you might hear the expression, he met his Waterloo. The team met their Waterloo in the Super Bowl, which meant, they had their big loss, their final loss, if you will. And once again, he's exiled to an island, this time St. Helena, and he dies on that island. He dies fairly young. He had some stomach issues. They said it might be stomach cancer. Other people, like Mr. Taluki, believe that he might have been poisoned. There was some arsenic in his hair, but I think that was just common at that time for his family. Lands had some traces of arsenic, so it was hereditary. If you not necessarily hereditary, but his family also had those traces of arsenic. So I don't know that it was as fishy as Mr. Taluki believes. However, there are people that believe he was poisoned. So that's the downfall of Napoleon. Here's a joke. Where can you find Napoleon in the supermarket? The eggs aisle. Woo! That's pretty good. Anyway, the effects of Napoleon, long-term effects. The Congress of Vienna met. These countries all got together and they said, hey, let's put the people back in power who were in power before Napoleon came around. And that's called legitimacy. So if I was king before Napoleon came around and kicked my butt, now he's gone, I get my throne back. They also thought that it was a very big thing to have a balance of power in the world, that not one country or one person became too powerful. So they wanted this balance of power. So they really worked hard in the future to try to make sure this did not happen again, that one guy didn't gain all this power and almost rule the world. So that is the stuff for Napoleon for today. I hope you had a good time learning about him. And, obviously he had an effect on us. The town next to us is named after him. Have a great day, everybody, and a great weekend. I'll talk to you soon.